Okay, cool. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our panel for Pride Month. I'm really excited to have everyone here. We're here with some incredible queer and trans leaders. If you want closed captioning, just a note, go to the bottom bar on Zoom and hit the live transcript button. That'll give you closed captions, and you can have different options and things you choose for that. Again, my name is Elly, and I am a communication strategist at Included Health. And for this month, I really wanted to host an event about living authentically, because that's what's really behind Included Health and our mission. We know that you can't really live authentically unless you have the care that you need and the resources and the support you need. So I want to tell you a little bit about Included Health before I introduce our panelists and we get started. Included Health is a concierge service and healthcare navigation platform focused on creating a better healthcare experience for the LGBTQ+ community. We help our members find respectful, affirming, and clinically competent healthcare providers, help them understand how to navigate the healthcare system as a person in the queer and trans community, and continuously educate on the importance of all kinds of care. And we connect them with peers who can help them with life events like coming out or navigating the workplace. You can find out more about us at includedhealth.com. If you want to live tweet any quotes you like or anything you find particularly inspiring or moving about the event or what people say, you can tag Included Health or people who are on the panel on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. We're Included Health in both places. And I believe that the panelists' usernames for, I think this is Instagram, are up there, but you can find them on Twitter too. Okay, and without further ado, I am going to introduce our wonderful panelists. So first we have Keah Brown, who is a journalist, author of The Pretty One and many more books to come, a screenwriter, and a noted bisexual. She writes about identity, pop culture, cheesecake, and being in love with every member of Paramore. You can read her work in the New York Times, Elle, Allure, among other publications. Theo Germaine is an artist living in Chicago with a multidisciplinary background in acting, music, physical theater, and visual art. They have been seen on TV on The Politician, Work in Progress, and Equal. And they have spent most of the pandemic raising a very ornery kitten who, if you look, you can see Stanley on screen. He's the most important part of this panel. Bre Kidman is an artist, activist, and attorney. In 2020, they became the first openly non-binary person in US history to appear on a ballot for US Senate. Prior to that, they mostly vacillated between very messy performance art and keeping people who can't afford a lawyer out of jail. Bre lives in Maine with their two beloved cats and is currently working on a leftist dance pop album, gauche paintings, and recovering from 2+ years of correcting the press on their pronouns while letting judges slide. Clark Moore is an actor and writer living in Los Angeles. He is most known for his breakout role of Ethan in the hit LGBT teen rom-com by Fox 2000, Love, Simon, and for his recurring role of AJ on the CW's critically acclaimed musical comedy Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. He is currently the host of Balm by Clark Moore, a podcast about healing and identity, which I love this podcast. I would really recommend that you go check it out. And last but not least, Alex Jenny, the drag therapist, who is personally one of my favorite people to tap on the shoulder as a source for articles about queer and trans mental health. She is a therapist and a drag queen who centers the healing and celebration of trans femmes of color in her work. She specializes in trauma recovery, trans affirmative practice, identity development, and changing our relationship with our younger selves. As a drag queen, she hopes to model for others the love, authenticity, and radical imagination that is possible for themselves and the world. So I'm really excited to introduce you to all of these lovely people. We're going to get into some nice personal conversation today that go beyond just queer and trans identity, but personal identity just as a human being. I'm very excited to talk with all of them, and I know that you will all really benefit from hearing what they have to say. So I'm just gonna kick it off with the first question. And I will kick it to different people. So the first one I'm going to throw over to Keah. What are some of your passions and how did you find them?
A great question. I I am very, very passionate about telling stories. I feel like whenever I get the chance to tell a story, whichever way I tell a story, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whether it's through acting or screenwriting or books or articles, I just like the idea of figuring out who people are and why they are the way they are. I'm a naturally nosy person, as you know. So journalism was the right fit for me because I got to talk to people to figure out, what makes them who they are and how that impacts the world at large. And so I'm very passionate about talking to people and getting to know what that means for the world. But I'm also really passionate about disability justice and what it means to live in a world that's not designed for people like me. And I'm also really passionate about cheesecake and Paramore and having the right outfit with the right red lip. Those are my passions that I'm really, really into and will always be ready to talk about.
What about you, Bre? What are some of your passions and how did you find them?
Um, I am really passionate about uh, gardening right now. That comes to mind. That's a newer passion, and it's like a thing that I've been doing to kind of like ground myself, which is a terrible pun, but like also true. I'm passionate about music, and that's always been true, like since I was very small. And I'm passionate um, about advocating for the underdog. Like the person who's getting screwed the hardest by the system is the person that I want to fight the hardest for. And so that's been like since I was little. I got bullied a lot as a kid, and just sort of like instead of like taking that and going quiet, I just got louder and more aggressive, like just more aggressively, loudly queer as a middle schooler in the '90s, and just sort of carried that through, I guess. And I'm passionate about my cats, who are really good cats, perfect cats.
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, as you may have guessed, I'm passionate about therapy and mental health. I got into that more out of like a need. I saw the ways in which my chosen family and myself were really struggling and suffering. And I was like, how do I get skills to help me suffer less, but also pay my bills? And so I kind of fell into therapy in that way. You know, being a therapist helps me hold myself accountable to the things that I help my clients work through. And with drag, it's about being able to like live and manifest a fantasy, which has helped me find my gender authenticity. And I'm really passionate about really being really hot. So,
Yeah.
pop culture is also another passion of mine. Cooking, yeah, and just spending time with my chosen family.
And I'm going to move on to the next question. Theo, what does living authentically mean and look like for you personally?
Oh gosh. I think that the best answer that I have, especially after this year, is how can one like actually learn how to be yourself and feel comfortable with yourself living in the system of economy that we live in. I think that there's a lot that I experienced as someone who's been working in the arts professionally for about 6 years in regards to like people just want you to work and work and work and work and be available. And that is something that we can really easily attach to ourselves. And that's not necessarily all of us. So I have really learned a lot this year about how detaching myself from this compulsive productivity has helped me learn a lot more about who I am. Yeah, that's my best answer. Outside of economy and outside of money making, outside of trying to get a job, who are we just as people?
What kinds of things do you like outside of work?
The big thing for me is I have a lot of interests and like passions that are in different kinds of art making, but I have the habit of always thinking, if I start doing something, like, oh, can I turn this into a job? And so I've kind of been trying to reverse it. And like if I'm playing music, I'm like, what do I feel like playing, instead of what do I think will get the most likes if I post it on the internet, or if I paint something. What's the thing that I really want to make, that expresses something about myself, or like it's just a cool idea, instead of like what could sell for the most, or like what could be used in in something. So yeah, I think that discovering more about who I am authentically has been just thinking about and making different kinds of art and trying to enjoy myself without being like, job, which is hard to do.
What about you, Clark? What does living authentically mean and look like for you personally?
I love Thea's answer because it speaks to something that I sort of realized or that it's a realization I have to keep coming to over and over and over again throughout my life, which is that there isn't a destination that I'm going to reach where all of a sudden I'm happy and, things don't bother me, or I'm not worried about money, or I feel whole in my career and love. It's more about sort of reiterating what Theo was saying, this practice of seeing the things come in and then actively choosing to respond to them differently, breaking the cycle in that way, rather than expecting to wake up one day and be like, wow, things that used to piss me off all of a sudden just roll right off my back. Like, for me, living authentically is this active daily practice of constantly questioning, who am I? Who am I today? What am I responding to? What speaks to, what clothes speak to who I am? What lifestyle, what city, what books, and constantly reaffirming that identity through the work of just self-exploration. But I think it's such a brilliant way to frame it, Theo, that it's a practice, not a destination.
Yeah. Alex, what does it mean and look like for you personally, living authentically?
I often think about what I would be like, or who I would be if I wasn't trying to survive so hard in the world and face like all of these systems of violence. And I try to find pockets of time and moments where I can like manifest that in my life. So like living authentically means being in the club and doing a number. And for those 4 minutes, I'm turning it, I'm engaging in mutual worship. People are worshiping me in that moment, right? And then I get to worship them back and say like, thank you so much for this love. I love you too, right? And in that 4 minutes, I'm not thinking about the transphobia that I'm facing in the world, or how I'm going to pay my bills, or how I'm going to pay for my medical transition, right? And so I think it's about cultivating as many of those moments as I can, and saying like, I can't wait, right, for us to completely dismantle systems of oppression before I can live authentically. I have to find it now. And it's possible to find it now, even as we fight collectively to resist those systems. So yeah, living authentically means, cultivating my passion to being hot, and listening to pop music, and finding moments where I can be frivolous and shallow and laugh with my friends,
Hot girl summer, hot girl all the time. Yes. Keah, what about you?
I mean, everyone really just knocked it out of the park in terms of me agreeing with you all. I just think that it's really important for me to think about what it was like before I could be my full self with everyone. You know, there were people obviously who knew everything, but I think for a very long time, I mean, I came out at what, 20, was I 28? So I'm new,
I was always cheering you on.
always. And so I think after spending all that time not being my full self, that I get excited at the idea that I can just show up and be like, yeah, this is who I am, this is what you're gonna get. And like you say, Alex, really every moment that I get to have joy and talk about pop culture and just let myself be happy and be proud of myself for getting out of bed that day is me doing that work and really treating myself the way that I feel like I deserve.
Yeah. Bre.
I mean, I don't think I can say anything that hasn't been said better by the other panelists. It was all pretty resonant for me, especially like the part about not making it a job. I'm kind of in a recovery year right now. And for me, like living authentically is like listening to my body and finding out what it actually wants and needs. Cause I think the grind kind of trains us out of that.
Mhm.
Really coming into that has been an important practice for me, a necessary practice for me. Because I think my instinct is to look at a given situation and be like, okay, like which Barbie version of myself would I dress up in for this situation, when in actuality what I want is to be the same self in all the situations and have that be okay. So figuring out what that looks like is it's an adventure.
And the grind is ableist. Like, people exhaust me with the whole rise and grind, you'll sleep when you're dead. It's like so many disabled people, myself included, can't do that. And I won't. And I won't be made to feel bad about the fact that I need to rest. Rest is so important to me. And I feel like living in a capitalist society where we're constantly told if you're not working and constantly productive, then you don't matter. But I'll be here to tell you that I matter whether or not I'm working every day this week or no days at all.
I needed to hear that. Yes. And Keah is always the first person that'll text me and be like, stay in bed a little longer.
Like, lay there. You deserve it.
Moving on to the next question. I guess Theo already touched on this a little bit in their last answer, but I guess I'll start with you, Keah. What did you learn about yourself and what you need or want from your life during the course of the pandemic? Is there any way you're ready to change your lifestyle as we begin to come out of quarantine?
I think I learned that there was value already in the work that I was doing, but also that there's value in me outside of it. One of the things that I often find I tend to do is tie my worth to the work, and at first it was great because it allowed me to learn to love myself, but then it became sort of toxic in that I thought if I wasn't working and not having freelance pieces to come out because the budgets were frozen, suddenly meant that I had to find worth outside of work entirely. And then what I learned about myself during this pandemic is that I'm kind of awesome. Like, I'm high key a badass who makes it work every single day and who deserves good things. It really took a lot of time off and like, going to therapy virtually for me to realize like I don't have to constantly be in movement in order to do things that matter to people and in order to do things that matter to me. So I think the biggest thing that I learned in our time in quarantine is that I deserve to be in every room that I enter, and also that the work that I do is great, but it's not all of who I am.
Yes. Bre, what did you learn about yourself and what you need and want? And is there any way that you're ready to change things coming out of quarantine?
So quarantine started right as the good part of my campaign was about to start. Like the day that I went to turn in my signatures for ballot access, on the way home, I heard that the pandemic had hit Maine. And so like I had just spent 3 months standing out in the cold collecting signatures, and then like bam, like all the good parts, no, they're not going to happen. So like it was a surreal kind of jolt of an experience. And I think since that, and it's been almost a year now, like it's been like, okay, well, what now? Like I had a pattern before this of going from one enormous insurmountable project to the next, like looking for something that was going to make me feel valuable or good, or like I was doing enough to justify existing. And none of them ever made me feel good or happy or like I was doing what I wanted to do. Like, you know, and some of them were really cool things and I'm glad that I did them, but also like none of them really brought me the satisfaction that I was looking for. So for me, the last few months have been about finding a practice of like day-to-day existence of like simple, small, achievable goals so that I can say like, yes, I did what I set out to do today and like it felt good, even if that's like brushing my teeth and taking a shower or watering my plants, like just finding satisfaction in manageable things and knowing that that is enough and that I'm enough. Like I don't have to be the top of whatever field I'm getting at in order to be valuable. And like the things that I produce, the art that I produce, and you know the things that I put out into the world don't have to be viral or incredibly popular to be worth saying or doing. Like just because it feels good to do it is enough. So making bad art is what I'm going to do going forward. Making a lot of bad art and not caring what people think about it.
Yes, I paint all the time and a lot of it is really bad, but it's like that process of creating something and learning and getting better that like makes you who you are and makes it enjoyable. Yeah. Theo, is there anything else that you learned about yourself or how you want to change your life going out of quarantine?
Gosh, that other answer that I gave really kind of said things that I learned this past year. I learned that I don't know, I really did learn so much this year that I don't know how to relay all of that. Definitely learned a lot about how special music is to me in a very specific way. In regards to like singing and like learning how to play an instrument, or remembering how to play an instrument. And I have always been like a very musical person, but I've always been a little bit shy about it. And part of that is because I love it. I love it so much that I feel very connected and I will like get very tender and emotional and like cry and things like that. And that tapping into a lot of feelings in regards to music has helped me know that like it's really, really awesome, you know, being an actor and getting the exposure and work that I've gotten so far. But, you know, if I were to never, you know, act again, which is not the case because I love it, I would probably be really happy just learning how to play a bunch of music and like just like making shit and sounding pretty, even if it's not for anybody but me. Yeah, that's a simple thing. But I learned how important, or rediscovered how important music was to me this year.
I feel like that goes perfectly into the next question that I have, which is, I'm going to kick this over to Clark. Are there any unexplored passions or hobbies or careers that you want to experience that you haven't yet?
Totally. I mean, part of sort of keeping in that same vein of like lessons learned as well, I always knew that self-care was really important to me, and it's sort of like the core of what my podcast is about. And one of the things that I've always sort of prickled or like been resistant to is physical activity of any kind. And I've never been a person who likes to exercise. You know, I am somewhat athletic, but I don't really see joy. I'm just not the kind of person who gets joy from like going to a gym and being alone in the gym for an hour, you know. But I realized in this past year that like being out and about and sort of like experiencing the world in a physical way is also important to my own mental health, not only my physical health, but also like all of the ancillary benefits that come along with socializing in that way. So one of the hobbies that I'm exploring or getting back into is tennis. And I'm using this public forum here to hold myself accountable.
Yes.
Since at this point in the process, getting back into tennis has consisted of my racket arriving yesterday. So we'll see where this goes. But one of the things that I realize is that I'm such a, I don't know if I'm an extroverted introvert or an introverted extrovert, but the older I get, the more I find myself needing to be alone. And in going into this past year, I used to make that joke that I discovered that my lifestyle was just called quarantine, because I was already staying at home. I was already not going out. I was already working from my bedroom, but then I realized, like, I actually do need people. I value community, and I value people who are sort of sharing in a shared experience or interest, not just like being together just to be together. That's nice too, but I do like to, I mean, maybe this is the creative instinct. I like to create something with people or to experience something with people. So I'm opening myself up to a lot of new hobbies, and we'll see. I have a cute tennis outfit coming in a few days as well. So
Yes.
who knows? The sky's the limit here.
I hope you post pictures on Instagram or something. I feel like I'm always trying to get like style guidance from other people. Alex, what about you? Are there any unexplored passions or hobbies or careers that you want to experience that you haven't yet?
I think I've been trying to explore different things through dating now that like I can meet up with people again. And I'm like very much a typical Virgo. And I'm very like systematic about what I want from people. And I think over quarantine, I also learned to center my desires and not waste time and be able to say like, this is what I want to do with you. And these are my boundaries. And so like, yeah, I've been learning, not learning, I know how to play tennis. I played tennis in high school, but I've been playing tennis with someone, and then another person's teaching me how to like invest in cryptocurrency. I'm like, help me learn how to make, nice cuisine. And like, I'm like going on dates with like a chef. And so I'm like, really like, how can I get these people to like teach me things and also experience some of the things that I wanted to experience but couldn't because it wasn't safe to meet people in person. So I think there's that, and then also learning how to rest. Like as things open up again, I'm like a very chaotic person and like need to be surrounded by people all the time. And so I'm like, Alex, like don't give away all of this time that you've cultivated to rest and be alone. So that's like something that I need to continue to cultivate for myself.
Yeah, I think that's really important for sure. Yeah, I've also learned that during the pandemic that rest is actually a passion. What about you, Keah? Are there any unexplored passions or hobbies or careers that you want to experience that you haven't yet or go more fully into?
Yes. Yes, acting. I started taking acting classes like right before the pandemic hit, and the great thing about it is I don't live in a major city, right? I live way upstate in New York, so I never had access to acting classes just because I couldn't get to where they were. And so if there's one good thing about the pandemic, it's the fact that I'm able to do acting classes over Zoom and explore this sort of long held dream that I never thought was possible. I was like, oh, they're never gonna hire me. I'm disabled. I walk into a room with a limp. They're not gonna want, that in whatever they're creating. But I found out that like people have interest. I haven't done anything yet, so I don't want to gas myself up too much. But I do think that there's a room for me. And this pandemic taught me that like I can have that passion for acting and also have passions for just sitting at home and watching TV for hours and hours and hours. Like I like the idea that you can have passions that aren't exactly productive alongside your passions that are.
You can watch TV and you can be on TV.
Yes, the goal. We'll see what happens.
I'm manifesting this for you. It'll happen.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, coming to a bigger screen near you sometime soon.
Thank you.
I am going to kick over the next question to Bre. Was there a time when you were not able to live authentically as yourself, and how did you handle that? And what advice would you have for queer and or trans folks about navigating that?
Many times, and I think the hardest part is that I didn't necessarily recognize that it was happening until afterwards, when I unpacked all the weird feelings I had about the experience and was like, oh, it was because I was trying to stuff myself in this box that did not fit. Like running for Senate, first of all, is a weird thing to do. It's an even weirder thing to do if you don't have institutional support. And it's like, it's weird on so many levels. And I was like, well, I'm going to go out there and show that a number of different people can be politicians. They don't all have to be the same type of person. But what you don't realize when you say something like that is that there's so much pressure to look a certain way, because when you look that way, people treat you like you're legitimate. When you dress a certain way, people treat you like what you say matters. So I found myself trying, I've been out as non-binary since 2014. So it had been like 5 years, but I didn't really have like my fashion sense sorted out. I still don't. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to wear men's clothes so that I'll be gendered correctly. And spoiler alert, it doesn't matter if everything I bought was off of men's rack, I'm still not going to be gendered correctly. But I thought, like, if I presented masculine enough or non-binary enough or non-binary in the right way, people would treat me better. And that's not true. So my biggest advice is, don't assume that it's something that you're doing that makes people treat you wrong or misgender you or not see you. If they're not seeing you, it's because they're not looking. And you can talk to them and you can try and make that connection. But trying to present in a different ways that people will take you seriously isn't going to get the result, and you're going to feel weird about it. I think another one, sorry, I don't want to go on too long, but like in the courtroom, I have never once been gendered correctly by a judge. Every motion I have ever filed in court in my entire life has had my correct pronouns in it. Never once in a courtroom have I been gendered correctly. And in those cases, most of the time I let it slide because it's not about me, it's about my client. So I think that there's like a little bit of like push and shove, like, like when it's a newspaper reporting using the wrong thing, yeah, I'm going to throw a huge fit and say like, no, you're going to correct it and you're going to use the right pronouns because you have the power to do that and it's about me. But when it's about my client, I'm like, okay, you know what? It's not about me right now. I'm going to keep it moving. Which I'm not saying is the right thing to do, but again, it's kind of just like, what makes me feel good about this? I'm not trying to make other people feel comfortable. I'm trying to make myself feel like I am true to myself in a way that feels good.
Absolutely. My I won't tell the full story, but my lawyer is actually non-binary and trans, and they're really amazing. I love them. But I was in court a few years ago, and the judge kept misgendering them, and I yelled at the judge, not even thinking about it, not realizing I could be like held in contempt of the court and like thrown out or arrested or something. And I was like, that's not their pronouns. Like, they're not, like, you need to use their correct pronouns. And everyone who was there was like, oh God. And later my lawyer thanked me and they were like, thank you. No one has ever done that before, but also that was like, like, you shouldn't have done that.
I'm also going to thank you for doing that, because most people won't correct a judge because it's going to come down on their heads. But like,
I did not even, I didn't
get it in.
What did the judge say?
She was actually really nice, and she just kind of like was like, oh, I'm so sorry, like corrected herself, and then was like correct for the rest of the time. And I like, yeah, she was like very apologetic and nice, which is not what I was expecting to happen. I think that is a story that I have that's like a testament to like who I am. I didn't even think, I wasn't like, oh, this isn't something I should do. I was like, this is a person who's helping me, like, you're gonna use the correct terms for them. Yeah, I would not recommend yelling at a judge, especially the more marginalized you are. I mean, obviously I have a lot of privilege, I'm a white person, but it felt like very important to do that in that moment. But if only we lived in a world where people used the correct pronouns or asked people, hey, what are your pronouns, instead of assuming. Someday. Sorry to interject, felt like a relevant story. I'm going to throw this over to Keah. Was there a time when you were not able to live authentically as yourself, and how did you handle that? And what advice would you have for folks about that?
I mean, I'd say those first 27 years were a time for me. And I think it's funny because I knew when I watched Gotta Kick It Up, a classic, and I was like, wow, Daisy. And then wow, also her boyfriend. But I think that it was really hard at first, and then when I decided to come out and be my most authentic self, it was because I was so tired of living like that, and of tucking myself away to try to make people feel safer or feel more comfortable. And like you, Bre, I'm tired of making people feel comfortable. It's about my comfort. And I guess the advice I would have is that even if the people that you know and love right now might not accept who you are, there will be people who will, and chosen family is as important as your biological family. You don't have to um, stay with people who don't understand who you are. I mean, unless you actually have to stay, then that I apologize for, but you're able to find community in ways that you never thought possible. And it's not like it's too late for you in the way that it wasn't too late for me. I think that was one of the biggest things that I had to work through with therapy, is like, I didn't come out too late. It's not too late for me. It's still possible to be who I am, even if I do it the day before I die.
Yeah. Theo, was there a time when you were not able to live authentically as yourself? How did you handle it? And what advice would you have for other queer trans folks?
Ooh, I simultaneously was stifled and felt like I couldn't live authentically, and also was kind of like, fuck you, to a lot of people when coming out. I kind of like thrived under like really, really rampant like biphobia and a lot of weird transphobia when I was growing up, but made decisions to like medically transition and come out and socially transition anyways. And I think that my experience from navigating that was such that I was still dealing with a lot of weird hidden shame that I couldn't understand. And it was just because of growing up with someone who was like, oh, you're trans, that must be because you were assaulted or something like that. And I didn't understand how much all of that like conditioned pieces of me to not feel like it was okay, even though I was like, no, this is natural. There's nothing wrong with this. Part of me was still like, you know, something's wrong with me. And so I think that the thing that really started to change some stuff for me honestly happened recently, in the sense that, you know, I really realized, I think, what Keah said, which is that like you don't have to be around people who are just not getting it. Like I had a relative as recently as like last summer send me that book that came out that was like the transgender craze, possessing our daughters or something like that. And they were like, oh, wow, this is some really interesting research. And I was like, no, Dad, this is not good. Like, this is not true. And I was like, you know, like, I don't got to be close with anybody if they are just like refusing to see or like try a little harder after like a very long time. So yeah, I hope that that's a good answer. And my advice to anyone else would be like, you will always find at least one person, I think, even if you feel super isolated, even if you feel like you can't be yourself, because that was my situation. I grew up in a really small area where people move away and then they come out. And I just kept trying to find, you know, somebody when I was younger who was going to be supportive of me, and eventually found it in therapy. So finding of an affirming therapist, even if that's the only way you can find an affirming person at first, that is going to help you out. so much. That was like the only thing that kept me going at times when I was the only person around who identified like I did. Yeah, so that's my answer.
Beautiful. And this last question from me is going to be for everyone. So when someone finishes talking, other folks can jump in so that we get answers from all the panelists. And then I'm going to do some audience submitted questions, whatever we have time for. So the last question for everyone is, what are the most important things that you think queer and trans people could and should be doing for our community right now? Can start with Keah.
Okay. I think that what we can do for ourselves and our community, and I said this earlier, is be okay with resting. I think that we just have to protect our peace. A lot of times, I know that whenever I'm in a space where people are constantly asking me specifically about like disability stuff and like, resources, what resources do you have? And it's like, that's great things, and I don't want to dismiss that, but I also think that it's important for us to remember that we aren't just here to mine trauma to make people feel like they're doing something that's meaningful or special. And so I think my biggest piece of advice is that, like, please take care of yourselves, please rest, please know that you don't have to mine your trauma for a byline or any sort of work, and you don't have to tell people things that you don't want them to know. You don't have to give out all of your information or things that you're uncomfortable sharing with people. The internet is great sometimes, but you don't have to give all of yourself to it. Just in general, make sure that you're putting yourself first and protecting your peace, and remember that people who don't get it are trash, and that's fine. You don't have to do anything to change their minds. You just have to be yourself.
I think in that vein, this is sort of was the thrust behind my podcast, because I noticed, I mean, I had been developing it for a long time, and I was sort of caught in sort of that trap of like, oh, what if it's this? What if it's that? What if it's this? What if it's that? And then the pandemic sort of helped me, took away a lot of those options and those possibilities, and made me really distill it down to the core, which came out of seeing all of the work that was happening last summer around racial justice and police brutality, and realizing there was a period of time, like a week or two, where every single minute of every single day, as I scrolled through my feed, every single post of people I followed, public figures, brands, friends from home, every single one was related to Black Lives Matter and to racial justice. And on the one hand, it was like, it was overwhelming, but it was also beautiful. It was like, oh, wow, we're all collectively, or at least my corner of the internet, is having the exact same conversation at the exact same time. But in the back of my mind, there was always this realization that that conversation was going to end. Oh, to Kyle, my podcast is called Soul Balm by Clark Moore. Oh, thanks, Cass. You got to plug it. You got to plug the content. But as I was watching this, I was thinking, like, I was already feeling exhausted. There were days where I was just like sobbing in my shower, which isn't that rare because I'm a double Pisces. So like that doesn't really say that much, but
I feel that.
I did do it, and it was notable. And I sort of was like, we need to be taking care of ourselves. But along the lines of what Keah was saying, like, we also need to be really conscious about how we are doing that. Like, rest is one of those things, but sort of telling yourself, I'm going to engage in self-care, isn't enough. You need to like look through your life and say, what, like almost on your calendar, when am I going to build it into my life? Am I going to build 5 minutes of meditation in the morning? Is watching this television show my self-care? And the secret is that anything can be self-care. It can just be 5 minutes of sitting in the corner quietly breathing. It can be reading a book. It can be having a conversation with a friend. But the most important piece is that before you do it, you identify it as the self-care that you're doing for that day. I think it has to have some intentionality behind it, in order for you to sort of like understand, this is my medicine, and to sort of consciously build it into into your day so that you can be taking care of yourself in a conscious way.
Yeah, I'm very much a Virgo. I did that exact thing. I was like, Virgo squad, I'm going to put this on my calendar and time it out so that I felt like it was productive, but also just me taking care of myself.
So I think the most important thing that queer and trans folks can do for our community at this point, I mean, rest is definitely a big one, but the other one that I want to highlight is don't reject yourself on behalf of others. Like, don't assume that they're going to reject you because of who you are, or because of how you look, or because of XYZ, because you're queer, because you're trans, whatever. Like, don't assume that you don't fit there, that you don't go there, that you don't belong there. Like, take up that space. And even if you don't get it, like, you being there counts. You showing up counts. That was like a hard one lesson for me of the last couple years. But I think, I don't know, for me, one of my biggest questions when I was determining, like, you know, can I be a politician? I don't know. I don't know any other people like me who are doing that. And I'm like, you know, I'm a glitter and pleather pants gay, like not a button down shirt gay. So like it was doubly so, you know, because it was like, I don't know if like people like me, you know, like we have Pete Buttigieg, right? And he's a normie. Maybe normie gays are allowed, but we're not. But I eventually said, fuck that. And I think that that's an important thing to do if you have the ability to do it. Obviously, build up your self-care habits first. Make sure that you have like a routine and you feel good in yourself before you jump into anything. But if you're feeling like, yeah, I could jump into something, don't write yourself off. And don't write other members of your community off. We are better at things than anyone gives us credit for.
Woo! So good.
I would say build like pods of care that are intentional and recognize that, you know, there, as we go through life and as we continue to have the audacity to continue proclaiming who we are in this world, we're going to get a lot of pushback. And, you know, life happens. And as I'm getting older too, it's like, wow, like life just continues to get harder in some ways. And so making sure that we're building pods of care to know, like, if I get sick, if I'm going to have this gender affirming surgery, who's going to take care of me, and knowing that I can do that for other people as well, and being intentional about saying that, like, that's the activism that we need alongside the fight that's resisting the systems, right? Like being able to cultivate care, being able to help each other, uplift each other, and also cultivate joy and recognize that the violence that we face often comes from the ways in which our existence pushes up against other people's insecurities, wounds, their own limitations and restrictions on themselves. We are proof that we can manifest the impossible, right? So we are worthy of celebration, we are divine, you know, and cultivate that joy and cultivate that audacity and keep saying, like, I am queer and I'm trans and I'm here and I'm proud and I'm full of joy, you know?
It's hard to actually think of how to answer this question because there's so much going through my head the whole time. I was like, this thing, or this piece of advice, or this thought that I have, or this. And so I think that my answer really is that everything that everybody else said is really, really, really good advice. And there are things in that I was like, yeah, I need to think about that more, you know. But my advice is that in the queer and trans community, especially for like, I guess maybe this is for white people specifically, even if we feel like we're really progressive or woke or leftist or et cetera, most of us were still cut from certain kinds of, you know, cloth that were not as such. And for the amount that we've tried to educate ourselves and learn about things, there's still a lot that is just conditioned. And I think that a lot of people are not good at being really real about that. I think a lot of people are like, yes, Black Lives Matter, or yes, this, or I did this, or I wanted this, or I participated in activism this way, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, what? Oh, sorry. Yeah, and I think that it's like we need to get really real about examining where all of this hidden performativity actually is, and we need to get white people need to get better at talking about like how we are so guilty still of microaggressions and so guilty still of doing of perpetuating all of this horrible shit that continues to happen in the country. I think that people are scared to be like, yeah, like I still have this issue, or like I hurt someone this way, or I did this, or or like these are the real ways that I was conditioned, and these are some of the lessons that I learned, even if I didn't experience this certain thing growing up, because we live in such a racist society. So that's kind of jumbled, but I just think, in short, trying to get really real about like how are we still perpetuating harm against fellow people in the country, and not being scared of being honest about how we are benefiting from the system and perpetuating harm. That's my thought for advice. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for like one audience submitted question, and there are a ton of them. I am gonna try to choose one, and anyone can jump in. Multiple people can jump in and answer this. Do you have any advice for finding queer friends when you're newly out, socially anxious, and highly introverted?
I mean, Twitter is a cesspool, but I literally would not have survived without you, Ellie, without a bunch of people who were literally like, we've been new.
Cautiously pushing you to
Yes, right.
accept yourself.
Like, Keah, come on, like, hey, over here, like, we're ready for you. I think that like it's really hard because social media is a mixed bag, but I think it's very easy to find people who both share your interests and maybe you can strike up a conversation that has nothing to do with queerness until you're ready to have that conversation. But I think there are people online ready and waiting to support you and love you through your coming out process and through your journey at large. And even though it seems like that's impossible because you might be introverted or whatever have you, there are people literally ready and waiting to support you. And I can tell you firsthand that that really saved me. So good luck.
I think that if you feel really shy, if you can talk about your interests, there's going to be other queer people, especially on the internet, who have your interests.
Mhm.
Whether it's like, I like this very specific video game, or, I really like this thing. That is something that is helpful for me if I'm ever like, I don't know what to talk about. Yeah, so if you're like trying to find ways to like inch into more socializing, what's that cool thing that you're interested in? There's going to be someone else who's queer who's interested in that, and you can start talking about that, and then it'll lead to other conversations. Yeah.
I really lucked into the queer community here after a breakup because I got introduced to one person, but that one person was in the process of having, building queer events in the city. And so the thing was, like, the events that we wanted weren't there, so we just made them. And having made those events allowed me to come into contact with tons and tons of queer people I would not have otherwise met. So while that may seem like a high barrier to entry to jump in, one of the events that we did was really simple to plan. We called up a local bookstore cafe and asked if we could have a speed relating event. They're like, sure. And we just had like conversation cards. I want to say it was like some sort of card game. And just set them up on the tables and had people rotate around the table and talk. And like they had a little form where they could fill out where it was like, do you want to talk to this person again? And it wasn't dating, it was like speed friendship. But it was like one phone call to plan and like, a Facebook event. So if you're feeling a little adventurous and like you have a little extra time on your hand, it might be a fun way to really like bring the community out, and you'll probably help other people too.
That's something I love that you said that, Bre, because that's my favorite part about like being a queer adult. It's something that I didn't realize was even a possibility, or when I was younger, because I felt so isolated, even being accepted, even being in liberal spaces. But I have this thought all the time. I'm a person that goes around to different cities. I'm you know, admittedly staying in primarily large urban areas, but I don't know any queer people who don't also know a bunch of other queer people. And what I mean by that is I have this feeling that it doesn't matter where I drop into in the world, having been out now for a decade and a half, I probably know someone myself who lives there, or I have a friend of a friend, or a friend of a friend of a friend, you know. And so at the risk of sounding really idealistic and rosy, it really does feel like I'm part of this global community. And just by meeting one person, even if they aren't an events planner or, you know, tapped into the community, they can probably introduce you to at least one other person, you know, one other queer person around you. And then there you have two. So sort of like building out community can happen in an exponential way, which is really fun.
I wasn't going to say this, but I feel like I have to now, Clark. I had Googled you prior, like, you know, when I saw you on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and I was like, I have to know somebody that this person knows. And I didn't at that time. And so, like, I feel like this is a very good illustration of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know like everyone here, and everyone here knows someone else that I know, and I didn't even like realize it. Like, I've known Bre through Twitter forever, not realizing that they're like friends with a multitude of my friends, and like I didn't realize that Alex knew a bunch of people I knew, and then I realized that everyone I know in Chicago knows everyone else I know in Chicago, and like things like this. It's just like, yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, I don't think that we can fit in any more questions unless we want to squeeze in one last one, because we have 2 minutes. I'm going to try to squeeze in a last one. Really quickly, anyone who wants to answer this, how do you express yourself fully in the face of fears of rejection and judgment?
I'll just say, you know, something that echoes a little bit of the sentiments that other people have said. One of my favorite books, it's a really short read. It's called The Four Agreements. I suggest it to everyone. One of the four agreements is don't take things personally. And it explains why, but the point sort of being that from a psychological perspective, and Alex, you can back me up here, what they're saying to you, rejection or hate speech or even violence, if it were to come to that, hopefully it wouldn't, but it's about them, it's about their trauma, it's about their pain. It's actually not about you at all. And in fact, you are just a vessel for the expression of their pain. And so in thinking about it that way, if you're able to then take the power out of the other people's hands, I don't need them. It's almost like you bypass the rejection. I don't need your acceptance in order to accept myself. I don't need your validation in order to validate myself. I don't need you to see me in order for me to see myself.
That was beautifully said. And Alex just posted something on Instagram about this today, and I immediately
this morning, I just posted.
It's cosmic.
Very topic.
It's cosmic, sister.
So you can follow me on Instagram, you know, @_. And just to quickly add on to that, it's about tending to the small part of you that is afraid of rejection, right? And like, that's the part of you that's in need, and recognizing that like, if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to get what you want, right? And I get that fear of rejection is really, really scary. And it's that old wound that's showing up, right? And if people aren't picking up what you're putting down, other people will, and it's about them, not about you.
I have two catchphrases about this. One comes from my grandmother and her great uncle, and fuck them if they can't take a joke. And I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. And the other is feel the fear, but do the thing anyway. I feel like my kind of public face, you know, social media face, whatever, is really brutally honest about how terrified I am at all of the things that I take on in the world. And I feel like being open and honest about that and like really being upfront allows me to connect with people who are like, I would be terrified to do that. I'm like, yeah, dude, me too. I'd be terrified to wear that. Yeah, me too. It's weird, right? But like, try it. It's kind of cool. I feel like it invites other people in when you're really honest about the fear that you're feeling and just like notice it, let it be there, but don't let it drive you.
Yes. Anyone else have anything that they want to add before we close out?
I do. Clark, I was
Oh.
trying to be cool about it, but big fan. Just needed to say that. And now
I'm
I
a
feel
fan
better.
of you.
Thank you.
I want
That's
everyone on
beautiful.
this panel to be friends with each other if they're not already. Everyone's amazing. Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. We've recorded this and I think we're gonna figure out a way to put it online. So if there's anyone who is worried about missing it or anything, we'll figure out some way to put it on our website. You can check all the panelists out on their social media. They're tagged in the included health posts for this event and in the Eventbrite. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this virtual panel during Pride.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.